Okay, so, all right, let's see how the new Modern Horizon 2 cards do in the archetype. So, okay, first, a little disclaimer. I actually played Dauthi Voidwalker a little bit at first. I played a test league with it. I was thoroughly unimpressed. So I actually sold my copies back, but then something happened. Actually, I started noticing that these graveyard decks, the Madness, whatever you want to call them, these decks with that card that fetches the Underworld Cookbook with that crazy long name, they those are all over the place, like all freaking over the place, and I don't know. I guess I just started to realize, like, man, Dauthi Voidwalker is a good hate card against this deck, you know. And also, like, sometimes I kind of missed having a little more graveyard hate. I mean, the biggest issue though with me playing Dauthi Voidwalker in the beginning was that I really, really liked the life gain. There was a lot of aggressive decks still in the format, and that's the main thing I like about Null Priest of Oblivion or Gifted Aetherborn, because I really like that lifelink. So I almost kind of gave up in a way, because I'm like, well, how do I cover all my bases? Because I still want more life gain, because also life gain is so important with Castle Locthwain, because basically that's what enables you to draw more cards. So I almost kind of gave up, but like then I realized, wait a minute, Cling to Dust. What if I play Cling to Dust instead of Nihil Spellbomb in the main? I'm like, that could enable me to gain more life, and it's also more efficient. And yeah, maybe if we play Cling to Dust, maybe that covers our bases, and maybe this was the better card all along in the main deck, maybe because it is more efficient. It's 1 mana instead of, playing Nihil Spellbomb, cracking it, and that's what we're doing a lot of times anyway in the main, because we're just using it as like a glorified cycler, and this has been kind of the tried and tested and true kind of cycler that also has upside. I mean, it's a cycler, but here's the thing: it's only a cycler if there's a card in the graveyard that isn't a creature to exile. I mean, exiling a creature is great if you need the life, but on a lot of matchups that aren't like aggressive decks or burn decks, the 3 life is not really going to be that relevant. So until later in the game, maybe when we've already got Castle Locthwain active. So here's the thing: as a concession, we have to play 8 fetch lands instead of the usual 4. I mean, I'm not thrilled about this for 2 reasons. I always liked 4 fetch lands better. I actually started off the build before Cling to Dust with 8 fetch lands, but I just found that too many because I was taking too much life loss. Also, sometimes I was running out of fetchable lands when the game went really late, and that was just, I mean, that was just not nice. That being said, I think if we have Cling to Dust, I think the downsides are going to the upsides are going to outweigh the downsides, because first of all, we need to ensure that we have a non-land, that we have a non-creature card in the graveyard on turn 1 for us to cycle a good amount of the time. We're even going to be stuck on 1 mana with like a Mishra's Bauble and a Cling to Dust a good amount of time, and we're going to need to ensure that we start hitting our further land drops. And I think we need to bite the bullet. We just need to up the fetch land count in order to ensure that happens. But aside from that, also more fetch lands also help ensure that Cling to Dust has enough fuel in the graveyard to fuel it from from being escaped, and then maybe we gain some life later in the game after we've cycled it a bit early on. Anyway, I don't know. It's kind of the working hypothesis. We'll see. Of course, is it theoretically possible that the extra life loss from the extra fetch lands offsets the entire point of playing Cling in the first place, which is to gain more life? Maybe, but don't forget that Cling is also more efficient, and maybe helps us, just have a few more mana untapped later, and as the game progresses in the early turns, maybe we can squeeze more fatal pushes, more collective brutalities, more removal here and there, see them a little bit faster. I mean, who knows? So there is a lot of advantages to this, even though conceptually there's a little conflict with playing more fetch lands and the life gain aspect, which was kind of the initial impetus to play this. But again, I think there's enough upsides overall to Cling to Dust, including the life gain. If this didn't gain life, I just don't think I could justify playing more fetches, or playing it at all, maybe, for that matter. But since it does gain life, I think that it'll offset. So yeah, so let's see. Of course, Dauthi Voidwalker in the abstract is a really strong card, and I'm hoping that we can actually see its full power on display in this league. One problem, though, is that we're not playing Thoughtseize, and Thoughtseize is definitely one of the ways you can get some more busted kind of plays out of Dauthi Voidwalker, although I think most of that is kind of magical Christmas land, to be honest, and I don't think we should necessarily be warping our deck just to try to do that. And at the end of the day, I just can't, you know, folks, I'm sorry, I can't justify playing Thoughtseize. The deck just loses too much life already, between, you know, with the fetches and with the Dismembers, which, you know, folks, I don't know, like, some people have suggested, like, Eliminate and other 2-mana removal spells, but, like, the thing is, man, you need a 1-mana removal spell, and Dismember, even though it's painful, like, I just like the flexibility. It's a 1-mana removal spell, a painful one at that, if you really need it, but it's also like a 3-mana hard removal spell for the most part. Most of the time it's a hard removal spell if you pay it for 3 mana. Sometimes you can kind of compromise it too. But there's just a lot I like about the flexibility, and I mean, heck, I love this card even in frickin' Mono Blue Merfolk, which can never actually can actually pay black, and it'll always have to lose life. And I think here, Dismember is just objectively a lot more powerful than it is in a Mono Blue deck. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to say other than I have a lot of experience playing Dismember, and Dismember is one of the marquee cards in my opinion for black. It's obviously so good that I play it in a lot of my, if not most of my non-black decks, either in the side or the main, and I don't know what to say other than that. I think it's proved itself, and I think I want to play it in our black deck as well. Again, it's just that flexibility, just, you know, being able to be made cheaper. I remember actually, and I used to play a Legacy deck with Snuff Out, and I remember when Dismember was printed, I was just like, I thought about it for a little bit, and I went back and forth testing between the two. I quickly realized that Dismember was so much better than Snuff Out. Snuff Out, by the way, is 4 mana, destroy target non-black creature instant. But if you control a swamp, you could pay how much life? I think you could pay 4 life. Yeah, you could pay 4 life instead of paying its mana cost. So Snuff Out was actually pretty decent. I mean, it was a free removal spell, but 4 life was painful. But here's the thing, Dismember was better because it wasn't limited to non-black creatures, and that came up a lot. Also, in my black deck at the time, because obviously it's a black deck, I also, like, it was just so much more easy to manage the life loss. There was a lot of times where I just had like 3 Snuff Outs in hand, and I just couldn't justify losing 12 life. And then I just could never cast the Snuff Out, so they would just rot in my hand. Dismember didn't have that issue. Sometimes I could play it for 2, sometimes I'd play it for 1, sometimes I'd play it for 3, but like, because I could sink more mana into it as I had available, I could just manage the life loss much easier. And, well, I don't know what to tell you guys. I mean, I don't know what to tell you guys other than that, in my experience, Dismember has more than proved itself, so, yeah. I mean, so I can't really justify to myself not playing it. And that's the thing, like, I have so much life loss already, I just can't play Thoughtseize. And also, like, it's just so bad in the burn matchup too, which we're really like cutting it close with not having enough for the burn matchup, but I think we still may have enough with the Collective Brutality and the Cling to Dust, and to a lesser extent Turok. You know, if we can curve out straight to 4 mana, sometimes we might be able to snag a burn spell or 2, and that might be enough to get us the distance. But yeah. Anyway, the rest of the deck is kind of conceptually similar to the Vampire deck. Just we don't really have a Vampire tribal theme anymore, because we took out you know, our vampires for a bunch of non-vampire cards. But hey, at least Gatekeeper and Bloodghast are still representing the tribe. But yeah, like, it's fundamentally the same deck conceptually. It's just, yeah, and basically the concept of the deck is basically, like, it kind of, the vampire thing, I didn't actually go into the vampire deck intending it to be a vampire deck, like I said. It's really mono-black mid-range, and it just so happened that a lot of the best 2-drops and just best creatures in the early part of the game that I would want to play anyway were vampires. So I thought, well, because basically I already had Null Priest, I already had Gifted Aetherborn, I already had Bloodghast, I already had Gatekeeper, and I'm just like, man, with 16 of my good cards are vampires, I might as well just play some type of vampire payoff. And originally I played Callisto Highborn, which was very meh, and until Dr. Queller recommended, when I played a game against him, he recommended, what's it called? Indulgent Aristocrat. And, you know, that card is not perfect, but I mean, that was a way better payoff card. Anyway, and the point is I wanted a payoff card, obviously, that didn't conflict with Lurrus. But the concept from the very beginning of this deck, which has morphed, obviously, into a non-vampire deck, is fundamentally to play a mono black mid-range deck that can support Lurrus. I just wanted to. Before I was actually thinking to play like Phyrexian Obliterator, which is a card I played in the past, a very underrated card. I love that card. But before I did, I just wanted to do a quick search for good black creatures on the earlier part of the curve, because I'm a big believer that you should always give the benefit of the doubt to cheaper cards. Other things being equal. Yeah, I just think like expensive cards just have a way bigger chance of being clunky. And sure enough, like black has so many good cards at the earlier point of the curve that I don't really see the necessity to go much higher anymore. And that means as a benefit we get Lurrus. But I could see myself playing basically this deck without Lurrus. The one concession is perhaps one could say that we should play Liliana instead of Gatekeeper if it wasn't for Lurrus. But to be honest, there are certainly some circumstances where Gatekeeper is better, like against aggressive decks where you could rather have a blocking body than just absorb some damage from with Liliana. Yeah, I mean, all things being equal, Liliana is probably better if you're not playing Lurrus, except that Gatekeeper, of course, is a vampire too, which isn't necessarily, we're not a vampire deck anymore, but also some of the times where you play Gatekeeper as a 2-mana 2/2 is also, it comes up more than you'd think, where sometimes you're just clunking out. And they're especially against control decks where they don't necessarily have creatures, although Liliana's definitely probably better with its uptick overall in that regard. But anyway, at the end of the day, though, by playing Gatekeeper instead of Liliana, which is the only real card we may want to squeeze into the deck otherwise, by playing Gatekeeper instead of Liliana, we get to play Lurrus. And Lurrus is just, well, I mean, I don't know what more needs to be. I don't know what more I could say about Lurrus that hasn't already been said. And yeah, and Gatekeeper is just super solid. It's a pretty close Liliana and imitator. I think this may even come out before Liliana, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember which came out first, Zendikar and Innistrad. I'm pretty sure Zendikar did. OG Zendikar, that is. So yeah, that's the concept. We play a lot of mid-rangey type black cards, and also get to play Lurrus. So hey, what can I say? And that takes us to Turok, which I mentioned briefly, and I think Turok's amazing, actually. Truth be told, Turok I think has turned out to be the MVP here. Dauthi Voidwalker is actually, I think, a little more of a role player. In some matchups he's great, in some matchups not as much. But Turok, there's very few matchups I've played where Turok hasn't been pretty good. We have no mana acceleration, but sometimes decks are clunky enough. Not a lot of decks necessarily just throw out their hand with all 1-drops and stuff by like turn 4. I mean, I've even kicked this against Prowess, which is probably the marquee deck that does empty its hand very quickly. and it's sometimes when they play like a couple expressive iterations, they just end up with extra cards in their hand, and then sometimes you just play Turok and it just goes nuts. It is legendary, but honestly that hasn't really come up too much. It's a 2/1 body, so it's fairly easy to chump block, or to just trade with something if you want to get some value before you play another one. Also, sometimes you can play an early copy, and then as the game goes on later, you can kick it, and then just ditch the smaller copy. And or actually, what you can do even better is you could have a Turok on turn 2. Then when turn 4 comes, you can play another Turok, make them discard 2 cards, and then you can keep the original one you had, actually, sack the other one, and then you can attack with a 4/3 Turok. So it's not bad. Actually, yeah. So, and I wanted to say, other than that, Turok really surprised me. It's a much more fair hymn to Tourach, but man, just making your opponent discard 2 cards at random, even at 4 mana, is surprisingly powerful. And critically, it does not cost life. So actually, this kind of fills some of the role that Thoughtseize did. I mean, already Collective Brutality kind of does when it comes to instants and sorceries without losing life and even being able to gain life. But Tourach also kind of does that now because Thoughtseize a lot of times hit the higher end stuff in their hand, and a lot of times that's kind of what Tourach ends up snagging if I can play it on turn 4. So I've never really not missed Thoughtseize as much with Tourach in the deck, and I think no matter what, even if I went back to a vampire tribe, I'd probably squeeze Tourach in here, even though it's not a vampire. And I remember back in Standard for a nanosecond when I was playing vampires, I remember I still squeezed a Nantuko Shade in. I don't know why people weren't playing that card. Whenever I saw that card, it was nuts for me back in Standard. It wasn't enough, I think, to make the deck tier 1, but there was no doubt in my mind that even though that wasn't a vampire, the format at the time was, I mean, like, it was a good card. It wasn't, like, I guess, busted or anything, but yeah, Nantuko Shaded Standard, I think, is always pretty good. But anyway, obviously in Modern, I don't think, yeah, not as much. But okay, so let's take us to some interesting sideboard cards. Obviously, I still want access to at least 2 Nihil Spellbomb, so we put 4 Cling to Dust in the sideboard, but we did move at least 2 of those Nihil Spellbombs into the sideboard, so they're here now instead of in the main, like in the Vampire build. And of course, Necromentia, Ratchet Bomb, these were in the previous builds, so you can go there. You can go to my deck tech for that if you want more explanation. But here's a new one, Lithoform Blight. I got the idea of this card. Shout out to Grimflayer here on YouTube. He was actually comparing Break the Ice to Lithoform Blight, and he was actually saying how much favorably Break the Ice compared. But for my purposes and kind of what I'm looking for in my sideboard, I was like, hold on, what is this card? When I had to think, I had to rewind the video. I'm like, what is this weirdness? It says draw a card. I'm like, I always like to see that, draw a card. And it's like, wait a minute, this looks kind of like Spreading Seas. And I'm like, huh, this is weird. So okay, this can stop Tron, sort of. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of digging this. So here's the thing. Here's why I kind of prefer Lithoform Blight for my needs in my sideboard over Break the Ice. So here's the deal. We need some Tron hate, but I didn't realize actually before that actually if we can just slow them down for 1 turn, ideally if we can play like Lithoform Blight into Necromentia, we can name one of their Tron lands, and obviously if they have all their Tron lands in play, then they're obviously Tronning out. But if we can slow them down for enough for like 1 turn, so we can Necromentia before they have all 3 Tron lands in play, we can name the Tron land they don't have, because I actually didn't realize this at first, but it says choose a card name other than a basic land card name. I thought it said non-land at first, but it actually says other than a basic land card name. So what this can do is this can snag the Tron land they don't presently have in play yet, and sometimes you'll even get it out of their hand. And that can actually be a legitimate strategy against Tron to just actually take Tron out of their deck. Now they can still hard cast stuff, and you're not guaranteed to win the game. Maybe Turok kind of like soars it up a little later with discarding some of their higher end stuff. Who knows? I have not actually played against Tron since Modern Horizons 2 came out. I do think I lost like twice and beat it once with the previous build when I had Damping Sphere. I think they kind of got unlucky though, and Damping Sphere is probably not good enough. But I did not know that about the Necromentia tech. Anyway, so that's the thing. So I need some hate against Tron, but I needed something ideally that had some application other than just Tron. And I might be missing something about Break the Ice, but I think Lithoform Blight compares favorably for my needs at least, quite a bit, because here's the thing. Look at this. I've got so many creature removal spells. Fatal Push, Dismember, and I guess Collective Brutality isn't a true creature removal spell, but I got 8 creature removal spells, and against control decks, I just need something half decent. I can't get stuck with all these creature removal spells in my hand, because they also just clunk up my hand with Castle Locthwain, and I can't draw more cards. Alright, man, I have to lose too much life to keep drawing more and more cards. Lithoform Blight actually kind of just replaces either Dismember or Fatal Push, depending on if, whatever random creature they're playing is more likely to be hit. Usually it's Dismember, because usually they're just playing Snapcaster Mage. So, usually just Snapcaster Mage. Although with Solitude now, Dismember definitely has more of an argument, but we'll see. Yeah, because against control you can hit a Celestial Colonnade. You can hit. You can also just kind of put them in a situation where you either color screw them or they have to take extra damage, which you'd be surprised. In a more kind of aggressive-ish type deck, forcing them to take extra damage is not inconsequential. But yeah, it's mostly just that it can hit utility lands. It can also hit Valakut. That was another problem I had. Is sometimes against the Amulet Titan decks, I would take Titan away with Necromentia, and then a random Valakut would still get me. And this allows me to overwrite Valakut without I really like the draw card, because it just puts a very high floor on the card. Because sometimes Break the Ice doesn't even actually hit Valakut. That's actually a huge problem. But even if it could, like, sometimes, I mean, just drawing an extra card a lot of times is better, because usually by that time they've got so many lands in play anyway that I'd rather just draw a card than them be down one. Anyway, I don't know what to say other than just that I've felt very satisfied with this satisfying my need to, like, just have some extra Tron hate, have anything to take out more removal spells against control decks, having some hate for utility lands. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Like, it's such a janky looking card, but I'm telling you, I was actually I was actually looking for some card like this that would basically some kind of spreading seas type card. I was not aware of this card's existence. I remember thinking before I saw that Grim Flare video, man, if only like there was some kind of spreading seas type card in black, because I was aware actually of Darkness, I think. What is it called? Or Presence of Evil, I think is what it's called. Presence of Evil. So evil. Oh, Evil Presence. Here it is. Yeah, believe it or not, I played this like a long time ago in like really earlier builds of Mono Black Midrange. Like, it's very underwhelming. It's basically a black Spreading Seas, but it turns land into a swamp instead of an island. Not Spreading Seas. It's a black Seas claim, but like the floor is just the floor is just very low instead of very high. Like sorry, I think I meant to say, I think I said low. I meant Lithoform Blight has a very high ceiling. Because, you know, just draw a card, you know, or maybe medium ceiling, whatever. The point is, or yeah, sorry, low floor. No, I guess high floor. Yeah, high floor. It has a very high floor, which is basically just draw a card. Yeah, it's a very high floor. This card has a very low floor, which is basically it just doesn't do anything. Yeah, you know, especially if they don't have a utility land and you need a kit. But this was kind of a necessary evil for me for a while against Tron hate. We didn't have Damping Sphere back when I used to play this, so I don't know. I never liked it, but sometimes when Tron was particularly infesting the meta, I felt like I had to do what I had to do to give me some type of chance. So anyway, I remember thinking just like, man, if only Black had a card like that, but more like Spreading Seas instead of Seas Claim. Yeah, I just remember thinking that would be great. And then when I saw that Grim Flare video, I'm like, well, folks, we don't have to play Evil Presence anymore. We've got a black Spreading Seas, which fills most of the needs that I think I have in this slot. So anyway, well, I mean, I'll tell you right now, if you guys don't like it, if you guys want to play something else, you know, y'all folks are more than welcome to try something else. I mean, you can try Damping Sphere, you can try Break the Ice. Heck, you can even try Rain of Tears, which I had for a little while, but Rain of Tears doesn't actually help you get to Necromentia, so I think a 2 mana or 1 mana spell is far preferable, but that's just me. But I don't know what else, I don't know what other kind of like semi-Tron hate card that you guys can, that you all folks can think of that may be better. But I think this stacks very favorably to Damping Sphere because it does draw a card, which also can help us hit our land drops to hit Necromentia, and it also deals with utility lands, which Damping Sphere doesn't. And that was one reason I played 2 Pithing Needles too, was sometimes I felt like I had to have some answer for some type of recurring type of activated ability on a land, but there were some lands like Valakut which weren't actually activated abilities, and I had no answer to, other than just win before they hit enough mountains, which, you know, sometimes you can do, sometimes you can't. Yeah, so anyway, I don't know. Damping Sphere, though, I will miss out on a little bit of extra Storm hate, but, you know, I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes Storm can win through Damping Sphere, sometimes they have an answer, sometimes, you know, I don't know what to say. Sometimes they have an answer anyway. Sometimes you can win without it. Our win rate definitely suffers against Storm. If Storm goes wild, maybe Damping Sphere is something we can reach for again because it doesn't overlap with Tron. But I just conceptually like how Lithoform Blight, yeah, it deals with a lot of the issues that I had, while also being Tron hate and dealing with utility lands, and just being a low floor card, a high floor card that I can just side in and take out some redundant removal spells, some unnecessary removal spells, and against control. Just, you know, anything's better than just a card like this. You can't bring in Damping Sphere against control. Just most of the time it's going to screw you over more than them because they have a higher curve usually. So, yeah, I don't know what to say. Let's see how it goes.